Hello, Bobcats. Mr. Buckman here. We're going to begin our lecture on early cities or first cities from your lecture notes. The lecture notes might be on a PDF for Google Classroom. The title of that might be Ancient Cities. In any case, we're just talking about old cities, okay? Whether I mean first cities or early cities or ancient cities, we're kind of talking about the same time period at the end of the Neolithic Revolution when agriculture and domestication of animals become big players and humans start moving away from that nomadic life where they're traveling around everywhere and they're starting to settle down in certain areas and building villages and eventually cities, okay? And for the sake of today's lecture, I want to let you know that for the most part, we're considering a city up to about 10,000 people. Now today, that'd be a very small group of people. That'd be a very small city. But it's important to know that during this time, a city of 10,000 would be considered huge compared to anywhere else. Some of these cities might only actually have about 3,000 or 4,000 people, but once again, that is a huge amount of citizens giving the ancient status of these areas, okay? So, following along with your lecture notes that you'll find, if you'll remember, anytime I have underlined material like here and here, that will be a vocabulary term that is missing from your lecture notes, and you will want to complete those as we go through the lecture, okay? So starting from the beginning, if we'll just quickly remember from our prehistory lessons, first cities, remember that humans made the change from being nomadic hunter-gatherers to being settled farmers, okay? We have that discovery that if you take the seed of certain crops and put it into the dirt, give it a little bit of water, you can watch that over a long period of time grow into food and other stuff that you can use. Now, if you'll remember from our videos last week, this is actually going to increase the amount of work that people do because they're going to have to tend that farmland. They're going to have to watch that farmland, and they're going to need to make sure that they are watering all of the crops that they are growing. Whereas when we were hunter-gatherers and we were moving around, we might kill an animal and have enough food for the rest of the week. We could just sit back and relax and just eat that old meat all week long, okay? So this move to being a settled farmer is going to come with a little bit of extra workload, okay? It's just important that you understand that, all right? Now, why are we making this move? Well, if you'll remember from last week, we have two main factors for this. And that's going to be agriculture. That's just a fancy word for farming, for being able to grow crops and use those crops, and learning the best methods of growing those crops. And also domestication. Now, if you remember, domestication would be that process where people are taming animals to be either pets or food. If you think of, for instance, you might have sheep. Sheep can provide you with wool to make clothing. Sheep can also provide you with meat. Sheep can also, I think I've heard of sheep's milk. I might be wrong on that. But there are animals that are also used for their milk capacities, like cows to make milk, to make cheese, to make yogurt. You'd see things like that happening in the subcontinent of India, okay? Domestication, using animals to our advantage, okay? Now, the first group of early cities that we're going to be talking about will be a time range of 7,000 BCE to 5,000 BCE. Now, we didn't really talk too much about what this term means, BCE, but many of you have already seen BC and might know that term to mean before Christ. 0 meaning the number that they kind of estimate the time that Jesus Christ was born. And we are AD, which is known as Anno Domini. We'll get into that at another point. But just so you know, 7,000 BCE, you've also got to add about another 2,000 years to that because we are in the year 2020, and this is 7,000 years before that 0 that most of us consider the birth of Jesus, or just where we set that 0 in our years, okay? So really, this is between 9,000 and 7,000 years ago. But we would consider the dates 7,000 BCE to 5,000 BCE. And that BCE stands for Before Common Era. Some of you might see AD changing to CE. That just means Common Era. We are in the year, right now, we are in the year 2020 CE or 2020 AD. One of the two, okay? Anyways, moving on. We have early cities are small. This is very important. They can't get too big because there's not really any good form of government to manage that many people. Also, it's very important that these early cities are near water. We talked about this, how in the nomad life, we are moving from place to place to be near water, but we're also moving on later on. If we're going to settle in a place, if we're going to stay put year after year after year, and we need water to not only drink and hydrate ourselves and survive, but also to water our crops, then it will be very important that these early cities are near a source of water, either a river or a lake. All right? Now, a really, really active place in these early civilizations would be an area that is now modern day Turkey. And we're going to try to use the map here in just a second so I can show you where I'm talking about. But modern day Turkey, this term Turkey is a pretty new term. It's actually only about 100 years old. Turkey was also known as, in these times, and you might see references to it when we talk about ancient history, modern day Turkey was also known as Anatolia, Phrygia. Phrygia is actually the name that the Greeks gave to this region. And also Asia Minor. Okay, this is one of your vocab terms. Make sure you don't miss that. Modern day Turkey is also known as Asia Minor. Okay, also Anatolia and Phrygia. Sometimes you might hear Turkey referred to as the Anatolian Plateau because it's kind of a high flatland. Okay, now in this area, by 6000 BCE, we have a pretty large settlement, one of the bigger ones in this time range. And that is known as, and I'm going to mispronounce this, I'm sure of it, but it's known as Çatalhöyük, okay? Now, I'm sure that it sounded a lot different to people 7 to 9,000 years ago. They probably sounded a little bit differently when they actually said this name. But this is how it's spelled for historians these days, Çatalhöyük, okay? Now, this city, it is theorized, had up to about 10,000 people by 6000 BCE. And this is a big deal. As I mentioned, everybody throughout the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and even parts of the Neolithic, Stone Ages, they're just moving all over the place. To have a settled city is a big deal. To have a settled city of 10,000 people is a huge deal. Okay? What did these cities look like? Well, we generally had mud brick houses, okay? You might hear the term adobe, okay? It's just making bricks out of the earth and the materials that are around you. We also have ovens in these places, which is kind of cool. They're able to build fires in mud brick ovens and cook things and do other things to keep themselves warm during the wintertime, okay? Also, it's important to know that Çatalhöyük did not have any public buildings. I bring this up because later on in the lecture, we will talk about other ancient cities that did have buildings that served a public function, where citizens of that city would meet and do certain things, like usually rituals, ceremonies, things like that. Okay? Moving on from Turkey, let's talk about another very, very vibrant region in this time, and that is modern day Israel. This is another one that has a lot of different names, okay? Israel is the name of the state that exists there today. It's also been known as the British territory of Palestine. It's also been known as Canaan as well too, or the Jordan River Valley, okay? But in any case, it is the region where we see Jerusalem, and it's on that east coast of the Mediterranean Sea there, okay? It's close to both Africa and Europe, which is important. But in Israel, we have a very old city known as Jericho. Once again, that's one of your vocabulary terms. Jericho, that is Jericho. Jericho is believed to be the world's oldest inhabited city. It didn't quite get to 10,000. Archaeologists have discovered that it was probably a smaller settlement, but it did have walls that helped protect them. And it also had towers that were for defense, and towers that citizens could get into and go higher in elevation in the event of flooding, which happened very frequently in the Jordan River Valley, okay? As I mentioned, the world's oldest inhabited city, it's possible that this city had a lot of citizens in it as early as 8,000 BCE. That'd be 10,000 years ago, all right? I'm going to bring this map down here and just kind of show you where I'm talking about for these first two regions in Turkey and also Israel, okay? Now, what we have here is we have right in the middle the continent of Africa. Here's South America, North America here. And I'm sorry if this is difficult to see, but what we have is over in this region right here. This is the Mediterranean Sea. And on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, you're going to see both Israel, where we would find Jericho that we were talking about, okay? Israel, this is next to modern-day Syria and Jordan, and just next to Egypt as well. We were also talking about Turkey, known as Anatolia, or Phrygia, or Asia Minor. That would be this little peninsula right here, okay? And part of the reason this is called Asia Minor is, if you see here, it's almost a gateway from Europe into the Asian continent there, okay? So two major cities in that region. We will talk about some other periods in this time as well in the next video.